If the song or the Journey of the Magi, which is the first of the series, the Ariel series, takes us into a biblical story about the Magi, people who came from a classical tradition. Song of Simeon, obviously, into the Jewish tradition. Anamula into the Shakespearean, all the world's a stage and men and women merely players. We have our entrances, we have our exits, the stages and seven stages and seasons of life, with what Eliot is working on. Marina is the fourth in the Ariel series, and in the Marina poem, Eliot goes right into the classical tradition, and the story of Marina is the story of Pericles, the king of Tyre. Um, he went to rescue a particular polis or city state. He wins the contest, and the daughter of the king gives his daughter to Pericles. They have a child, which is Marina. On the way home, there's a shipwreck. In many ways, it's Odysseus' story. It's Homer, but also told in a different form, the Periclean stories. It's also drawn from what's called the Seneca's The Mad Hercules, where Hercules goes to fight in the underworld to bring goodness back. But all the darkness and all the evil and all the struggles he's seen, he comes back a very different person because of what he has seen and done. It's like people go to war; they're not the same when they return, or when people enter adult life and various things they've seen and done. They're not the same person they would in those phases of innocence. The songs of experience make a person very different. So when Hercules returns, or when Pericles loses what he thinks he has lost his daughter, Marina, she has drowned, and can he ever find his daughter again? So again, the suffering and tragedy. The quote that opens Marina is, "What place is this? What region? What shores of the world? Where am I? Under the rising sun and beneath the wheeling course of the frozen bear." So there's a sense in Marina of disorientation. The ideal of what could have been, of how life might have been, is not how life is. Both for Hercules and for Pericles and for Marina, life is the unpredictable suffering and tragedy, and then how does one live with that when they've lived through suffering and tragedy without slipping into despair, cynicism, suicide, depression, and totally giving up? So in Pericles and Hercules and Marina herself, it's the story really of Pericles reflecting on the journey, what he has seen and what he has not seen, and where is his daughter? Where has she died? And of course she hasn't. And it's the story of this poem is sort of a eulogy to her, and yet the story itself, he refines Marina. And so in this particular song in the Ariel series, it ends with what seas, what shores, what granite islands towards my timbers, and the wood thrush calling through the fog. This is how it begins. And so the seas, what shores, what granite islands towards my timbers. He's lost his way, he's lost Marina. Where's his wife? And yet the wood thrush is calling through the fog. So much of life can be a fog in many ways. And he says, my daughter. And so the particular poem ends with, resign my life for this life, my speech for the unspoken. And so the awakened, lips parted, the hope, the new ships. And so there's this living intention between hope and despair, suffering and tragedy, and again, hope. Too much tragedy and despair leads to just a giving up, a folding of the hands. What's the purpose of going on? And we can see a lot of that today in a culture overwhelmed by cynicism in terms of religion and politics and education and many, many other things in which people feel betrayed. But hope that doesn't face into tragedy and suffering is thin and it's shallow. So Marina is the story of Hercules, it's the story of Pericles, and it's the story of Marina, all facing into the painful issues of suffering and tragedy, and yet meaning hope to go on. And in that sense, what is Advent about? It's about the child, in one sense, in which all seems hopeless. What is the child the incarnation meant to do in the slaughter of the innocents? How are Joseph and Mary to navigate when they have to flee into Egypt? Where is God? Is God even there with them? The promise is there, and yet the fulfillment of that promise seems ever at a distance and a distance and a distance. And so this particular poem, Marina, really brings to the fore the same questions that Joseph and Mary must have been asked, the same that Magi asked, Simeon asked, Anamula, is how do we square hope, aspiration, idealism with the stubborn and obstinate nature of realism, without either slipping into cynicism, skepticism, a folding of the hands and giving up, or a naive idealism which inevitably by its very nature will destroy songs of innocence, because it's incapable of dealing with the disappointments, the frustrations, the betrayals of life. So Marina is continuing the songs of Ariel in that sense. Ariel is freed from the tree, but there is so much that Prospero and Ariel have to deal with in The Tempest, because Ariel comes from Shakespeare's, one of his last plays, The Tempest of Life itself, and Prospero himself having to get off the island after he has been betrayed as well, by his very, very close family members. So it's, again, Eliot is, okay, if we're going to deal with Advent, let's look into real Advent, not some silly notion of Advent, but the depths of darkness as well as the possibility of light.